Welcome to the first official episode of Ramblings of a White Belt. Today is January 10th, 2017, and I'm Kevin, your host. I want to thank you for tuning in from wherever you are. So first off, let me tell you about what this show is going to be about. This show is going to cover my journey and experiences in jiu-jitsu. I also plan to have guests on the show to talk about their jiu-jitsu journey and experiences, and maybe offer me some advice. I may end up changing my mind on some topics or even contradicting myself at some point, but that's all about learning. My goal is for us to learn together. So currently, I am a white belt and I've been practicing jiu-jitsu for about 18 months. I am a 34-year-old male. I do have a small background in martial arts and other combatives programs. And I train at Lovato's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Oklahoma City. So let me talk about my martial arts background. I started out when I was a child in judo. And I can't remember how old I was when I started judo, but I do remember that I got my green belt. And shortly after that, the school ended up closing. And there wasn't another place to train at. So I went for a very long time not doing any type of training at all. And during that time, I had a strong interest with the samurai and Japan and that history and all that stuff. And I wanted to learn how to fight with a sword like the samurai did. And so that brought me to Kendo. And so I started doing all sorts of research into Kendo and how to find a school and all that stuff. And the area that I lived in at the time, there wasn't a Kendo school, but there was a Kumdo school. And Kendo is the Korean version of Kendo. Having never taken Kendo, I couldn't tell you what the differences are, but Kendo at the time was it was providing the need that I had or fulfilling it. So I did that for a few years. I got my purple belt, if I remember correctly, in Kendo, and then I ended up enlisting in the military and became a law enforcement officer. And so then part of the training there is you have to go through law enforcement combatives, and I really enjoyed that. It had a stand-up game, it had a ground game, it had control techniques. I really liked that. And then my training just kind of naturally segued into the Modern Army Combatives program. And I went through several levels of that. And again, I really liked it. It had a stand-up game. It had a ground game. It had some control techniques. And I liked it. Then I went to Krav Maga. And I went through several Krav Maga training seminars, and eventually was selected to be a Krav Maga instructor. So I had to go to a training course that was pretty intense. It was 2 weeks long, and I want to say maybe 12-hour days. I mean, it was like I said, it was pretty intense. But I really liked it. I actually went into Krav Maga not really being a believer in it, and I came out being a believer in it. I really liked it, the simplicity of it and the violence of action, and I thought it was good for what it was. Now, all of these martial arts and combatives programs that I had done, with the exception of Kendo, had a ground game to some extent. And it was very basic. It was very watered down. The ground game that those martial arts had gave me just a taste of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it was based off of that. So I was watching the UFC like everybody else and Bellator, and realized, these guys have a standing game and they have a ground game. I could probably do this. So I started training MMA. I didn't have any dreams or aspirations to be in the octagon in the UFC or anything like that, but what I liked about it was it kept my game sharp and it kept me in shape. Now, the one thing that was made blatantly aware to me was that my ground game sucked. What I thought I knew when it came to folks that actually had real training, everything that I tried didn't work on them. And I ended up getting choked out a lot. I ended up being put into weird contorted positions and just getting punched in the face. And I realized I really didn't like that too much. So then I got to a point in my career where I'd stopped the whole MMA thing, and I had enough time that I could actually seriously train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it's something I'd wanted to do, but like I said before, my career just didn't let me do it. I didn't have too much time or too much free time. So also a big part of me is I like firearms. I like shooting. I've been through a decent amount of training with that. And there is a show that I came across called Practically Tactical. And it's run by a group of guys, Nick, Jesse, and Jeff. If they have a great show, I highly recommend it. If you Google Practically Tactical or you YouTube that, it will pop up. And if you're into firearms, give them a listen because I really like their show. But I was actually featured as a guest on that show, and I was introduced to a guy named Scott Jedlinski from the Modern Samurai Project, and I really liked talking to this dude. He had some great insight on shooting, and he was also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. So one conversation that he and I had was, I asked him straight out. I said, "Hey, Scott, I want to start training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Where should I train?" And at this point in time, I just moved to Oklahoma City. I think I'd been here, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months. And Scott told me in Oklahoma City, there's only one place to train at, and that's at a place called Lovato's. And so I was like, all right, I'll Google that and figure out what Lovato's is and all that good stuff. Come to find out that Rafael Lovato Jr. is a world-class champion black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. He has done a ton has had a ton of accomplishments, and there is a huge pedigree at Lovato's. So I went over there and I talked to them and got signed up, and I bought my gi, which is if you don't know, it's the uniform that you wear basically. And I decided, all right, the next day that they have a beginner's class, I'm going to go there. And so I think I signed up on like a Tuesday, and there was training Wednesday. So this brings me to the hardest day I've had to date in Jiu-Jitsu. And that was actually going in there and stepping on the mat for the first time. That was a very crazy experience. Mainly because I think, like most anybody else that's excited about something, I did a lot of Googling and YouTubing on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and beginning and, what to expect and all that stuff. And one of the biggest themes that rang throughout was leave your ego at the door. And I'll be honest. I mean, I do have an ego. A lot of the training that I've been through, they want you to have an ego to an extent. Now, I won't say that I walk around like chest puffed out and, trying to pick a fight with everybody. But, I do have an ego to some extent. And stepping out on that mat, realizing I couldn't have an ego, it was a little tough for me, to be honest. I knew it needed to be gotten rid of pretty quick. And so with that, I had to swallow my pride. I had to realize that most everything I had previously learned and been trained in isn't really applicable on the mats. There are some things here and there, but for a vast majority of things, it didn't belong on the mats of jiu-jitsu. So had to swallow my pride, and I also had to realize that, and this was very apparent in day one, that I was going to get my ass kicked every single day. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But there was a crawl, walk, run approach to the training. And so part of my ego and part of stepping on the mats for the first time was I was in the crawl phase. And so while there were other white belts that were there, and there was other blue belts that were there, and purple belts and whatnot, and they were doing these really cool moves. They were jumping guard, and they were hitting these takedowns, and watching them roll was just awesome. I was over in the corner learning how to shrimp and how to break fall and how to do drop steps, and that was like day one. Then day two, it was learning the different positions and holding those positions. So you have your standing, which, not a whole lot to do there so far. But then there is side control and mount and guard and the half guard, and, learning those positions and having to hold those positions. So there was that. And then there was the very first submissions. And I think they're the same submissions that everybody kind of learns in the very beginning. And that is from the guard, learning the arm bar and the X choke. And then learning to oompa, and learning from the oompa how to go into like a head and arm choke or an X choke, things like that. So that was my crawl phase, and that lasted for a few weeks. And I'll be honest, I mean, it was a little frustrating being in that phase. But then I got to the walk phase. And the walk phase, there was positional sparring. I could actually join the main class and learn the move of the day. And then when everybody else was rolling, I was in positional sparring. And I had to start in somebody's guard and try and get out of their guard. Or I had them start in my guard and I couldn't let them pass my guard. And then the same thing with mount, and the same thing with side control. And, it was fun. But I got my ass kicked every single day. But very slowly, over some time, that walk phase got a little easier and a little easier and a little easier. I was able to start holding people in my guard, and I was able to start actually passing people's guard a little bit. And the same thing with mount and side control and that kind of stuff. And that brought me to the run phase. And that's where you're learning to actually roll live. You've learned the moves of the day. You have a couple tools in your tool belt, so to speak, and you know a few takedowns. You know how to jump guard or pull guard. You know a few submissions and all that stuff. So it's time to roll. It's time to do it live. The trick of it is, though, is doing it without spazzing. And spazzing out it's difficult for me to truly understand what it is, because I didn't spaz. I kept asking my training partners if I was spazzing, and they're like, no, you're good. I was like, okay, well, that's strange, because I kind of figured I would spaz. So what I figure spazzing is, because I've rolled with a few white belts now that have that spastic nature to them, is they just get a little too crazy. They start flailing around a little bit. They're using their brute strength. They're just trying to win at any cause. And that could be doing things like grabbing at your fingers while you have a choke in. They could just, like I said, just flailing around kind of wildly. They're not being calm and thinking through that roll and focusing on the technique of it. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not the end all be all of this. I mean, I get in the middle of a roll and my mind goes blank, and I don't remember what the technique was, or I don't remember, or I don't think through what I should be doing after I pass somebody's guard. What's next. So that's still a learning point for me, obviously. But the big thing is learning occurred every single day. And it will continue to learn every single day. So in my first year, there was progress just about every day. I ended up doing a tournament in my first year, and I signed up in July, and I did my first tournament in November. And I may end up doing a separate show just on that tournament, as I'm preparing for some more tournaments here coming up in the very, very near future. But going back to the learning aspect of things, especially in that first year, there were days that, I just felt absolutely beat up. And I don't mean like getting slapped in the face beat up. I mean like just mentally. I couldn't figure things out. Coach would show me the move of the day, and in the 20-minute drive it takes me to go back to my house, I've forgotten it. But the important thing to remember is learning occurs every single day. And some people may look at it like, oh man, I lost like 4 rounds. We did 4 rounds of rolling today and I lost every single one of them. Well, that's not losing, that's learning. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out. But even now, I'll roll with guys, blue belts, purple belts, etc., brown belts. And they choked the shit out of me. I'll be honest with you. But I learned from it. It's like, okay, the reason they got that choke is because when I did this, they were able to do that. I created too much space and they were able to capitalize on it. So learning that aspect of things is huge. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, I've been training for 18 months now. And I'm just now starting to figure this stuff out. I can't do things right all the time. In fact, probably more times than not, I'm not doing things right. But at least I'm recognizing that I'm not doing them right. And so now the next step is start doing it right. Right? So anyways, that's all I have for the first episode. I plan on doing a regular release. I just haven't figured that out just yet. I got some ideas going through my head. I think the next episode we do is probably going to be about tournaments, especially my first tournament, the feelings I felt, preparation for it, all that stuff, and how that's leading into the tournaments I'm preparing for this year in 2017, and kind of connecting the two and learning from previous mistakes and all that. So again, I thank you all for tuning in today, and I hope that you get out there and roll. Take care.